In this video, we're going to talk about guide curves, how to create them, and what kind of requirements are needed to make a guide curve valid. So let's first start by sweeping the surface. So we already talked about sweep profiles and sweep paths. And we noted that the path does not have to intersect the profile as long as it intersects the plane the profile is drawn on. That's not true with guide curves. A guide curve has to have a Pierce relation with the profile. So for instance, this is okay as a guide curve, or any of these profiles are okay as guide curves. Where you get into trouble with guide curves is if you try to introduce too much curvature. For instance, if we look at this from the side, we have three different splines and they're curving in three different directions. Now, this is too much curvature to try to introduce when you're dealing with a sweep. You typically only ever want to do a sweep profile and a path, and maybe one guide curve if you have to. It's always been my motto that whenever dealing with complex surfaces, creating splines and sketches and so on to define these surfaces, that less is more. If you have to use multiple guide curves in order to create a swept surface, then you're probably using the wrong tool. There's plenty of other tools that you can use to help create that geometry. Let's go ahead and reorganize this. So for our original path, we're going to use this center spline right here. And then for a guide curve, I'm going to select one of the sides. And you'll notice that this gives you a completely different surface. You can select this side, and that also gives you a completely different surface. So in this case, that allows us to sweep one of these paths and use another one as a guide curve. But as soon as I select the other one, you can see that the curvature introduced creates a surface that is very tiny. It's really close to our profile plane. And that's because once we get past this point, this surface is no longer a swept surface. It's starting to get really complicated and become a boundary surface or a filled surface. So it's important to understand your tools, understand the requirements, such as a guide curve having a Pierce relation with your profile, and know when to use the right tools and when to use the wrong tools. So for instance, if we were going to take a look at this, and we'll cover boundary surface in a later video, but if we were going to take a look at this curvature, and this had to be our type of curvature, we can use something like a boundary surface, grab all of our different paths and profiles, which in this case are called direction 1 and direction 2, and actually create the geometry we were looking for. So this is a case where you can try to introduce too much into your swept surface, and you actually really need to be looking at a different tool.